Okay. So I hear Molly started the recording now. Hello, my name is Eric Dierks. I'm your host this evening for the IDCTA Masterclass eventing interviews. With me, we have my very good friend, Doug Payne. Before we start, if you're ever curious of what the IDCTA is up to and the new programs we have out there, or even if you want to watch interviews or rewatch this one, you could visit idcta.org. We have interviews on there from David O'Connor, Danny Emerson, Jimmy Wofford, even Doug's mom, Marilyn Payne. We talked about some things we could do better in the dressage arena. You could go to idcta.org, click on eventing, and you'll see some links that you can click on to get to those interviews. So without further ado, my guest, like I said, is a good old friend. We've clinicked along side by side, even though I told him that we won't tell about those camping stories. But he's one that has put in the numbers from observing from the outside. I've known him for a while. He's in the show jumping arena, jumping Grand Prix. He jumps. He's been eventing at the 5-star level, and he has competed the upper levels of dressage as well. He's also a TD, licensed judge, an ICP certified instructor, and he's always on the move. And we
I pay Eric very, very well for all of this.
I tell you, before we set up the interview, we didn't know the team was announced, and after we set up this interview, you were announced on the team. So I thought, wow, we've got Doug here first, and this could be your practice run for all those future interviews, Doug. So yeah. Congratulations on making the Tokyo team, and welcome.
Well, thank you. Yeah, thank you very much, and thanks for having me, for sure. And I think for everyone here, I guess use the chat and pay Molly well, but happy to answer any questions you guys might have throughout.
That sounds great, Doug. Well, first, I want to kind of Quentin Tarantino this story here and start with the end. Here we are, you're getting ready for Tokyo, a dream that a lot of people would have of making, some young riders would have of making, but also that we are in love with watching the sport through international competition and watching the lens on the TV and seeing these beautiful courses from around the world. And you're going to a country that you wouldn't think it holds an event. So I'm really curious how you guys are preparing, and tell us a little bit your feeling making the team, first of all.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you, it's a very humbling experience, and grateful to the many people that have helped sort of along the way, and certainly continuing to help now. It's very special because Horace Van Diver, we joke with him that he's the old man of the crew, but he's 17 this year. And it's really exciting that Debbie Crowley owns him with us, has bred him as well. So she's had him since before conception, and to see her horse, a homebred of hers, go and have the honor of representing the country, I think it's very, very special. We've got a couple others of hers, which is pretty awesome, actually, the younger ones coming up. But yeah, it's more of a thing that's it's less about you and about the people that have allowed you the opportunity to do it.
Well, tell us about Van Diver's breeding.
So he's a Trakehner. He's by Windfall that Darren Chacha rode in the Olympics in what year would that have been? Atlanta, was it, or is it after Atlanta? Might have been Sydney, actually, in 2000. I think so, right?
I think it was even Greece.
Oh, might have been Athens, 2004. I was totally off. But yeah, so by Windfall, and a mare that Debbie owns herself, obviously. And we've actually, which is really exciting, we have a 6-year-old called Diacondias that's actually out of the same mare by Songline. So it's kind of neat to see the next generation. And obviously I'm very, very excited for where Quinn is now, but it's always fun to have the next generation coming up, and you get a lot of insight the next time around, because there's so many traits that she has that he also I've seen before, basically. So it'll be a lot of fun. And I think the breeding and the progress.
This is him pictured here coming over at the Rolex Walnut Ditch, isn't it?
Yeah, that's wild. It's a wild picture, isn't it? He's probably one of the most genuine creatures that I've had the opportunity to work with. Just a massive, massive heart. And interestingly, he had an injury quite early in his lifetime to one of his stifles, and was actually he was always just a little weak on that right hind, and frankly, he was actually spun at Kentucky one year because of it, and we ended up doing a surgery at UGA probably 4 years ago now, and he's never been sounder, stronger, better than he is now. And it's a pretty amazing thing, especially at his about being 17 now. You wouldn't expect, but every year and every time he comes out, he just comes out stronger, better, and more prepared. So it's a lot of fun, because at this point he knows his job. We're trying to fine tune little aspects to make his performance better, but it's not like he needs a ton of runs or needs to see a ton of jumps and that kind of thing. So it's very, very special, especially having a partner with us for this duration, that he gets to have the opportunity to represent his country.
And what's going to be the itinerary getting to Tokyo? When do you leave?
It's pretty wild. So this is our first bit of preparation. Actually, is here with us tomorrow. Actually starts up. We're actually jumping in Kentucky at Split Rock, which is actually a CSI 2-star this week and a 3-star next week. One of our top jumpers is jumping here, but Quinn is along with a number of other ones, and this will be his first sort of preparation back from a little vacation that we always give him after the Kentucky 5-star of the spring. So he's going to be at Split Rock this and next week. And then we're home for 10 days or so. And then there's a mandatory outing, which is at Great Meadow in Virginia. And we do a fix-a-test the first day. And then we do a sort of shortened competition for the next 2. And that's open to only the people that are either on the team or alternates for the team. So I think there's 12 horses total running there. And then not too long after, I think another week and change after, we head out to quarantine in Aachen, Germany. And so we're going to go to Germany and we hang out there for, I want to say it's 10 days or so. And then from there, then we head over to Tokyo. So it's going to be quite a trip. I think Quinn will be gone almost a month from sort of start to finish. And I'll end up being a little bit lagging. I'll be there sort of meeting them when they get to the farm. So I'll probably be gone for just around 3 weeks or so.
That's got to be unusual, not riding as many horses while you're there. And
I don't know that I've been that long a period of time with one horse since college, probably. I mean, that's got to be it, actually. So it's no doubt it will be unusual, but I will say the U.S. team has put a lot of time and energy and effort, and we've had a number of calls both with the sort of U.S. Equestrian, USEF, and U.S. team, and then also actually even today at 5 o'clock we had a call with the USOC, which they had presenters that were sports psychologists, nutrition, people specialized in sleep, and sort of all sorts of different things to try and help all of us deal with it as best that we can.
Yeah, I'm curious about that too, because as you're preparing for the one event on one horse, and you don't have any other distractions, it's probably pretty easy to start overworking. Even do you have people
Yeah, I would say overworking and overthinking it. We're I guess I'll give a little bit of background. We have roughly 25 horses going between my wife Jess and I, and Jess has ridden through 5-star as well. And I would say they're just about split down the middle between eventing and jumping at this point. And what that ends up sort of creating in our lifetime now is that we're on the road. I think pre-COVID, I think we were on the road 45 weeks. And every one of those weeks, so this would be quite a light one, but I'm probably riding 6 here. And, you know, you would say sort of 5 or 6 would be the minimum per weekend, and up to, especially the weeks jumping, could be 10 or 12. So it ends up often on a normal competition day that you're kind of just getting on and off, which becomes one of those things you get very accustomed to. And it's really nice because in the end, you don't overthink anything. And if you make a mistake, you have a chance to go back and correct it the next time around. And certainly the one horse trips are a lot harder. We've been lucky enough. Quinn has traveled quite a bit. He's been to Blenheim and Burley, and you know, we've had some other trips too over to, you know, Star Witness went to the Pan Ams in Lima, Peru, and yeah, we've been very lucky. Competed in France a few times, so it's one of those things we have a sort of a good idea of what's going on, but certainly never to this duration have we had this kind of exclusivity.
Well, and let me just share that success that you had at the Pan Am Games as well. You were 4th individually.
Yeah, that was
a beautiful mare, Star Witness.
Yeah, no, it's pretty exciting. It's funny that, I mean, that picture is wonderful. That still gets me like nervous and anxious looking at anything that has to do with Lima. Never was I more happy than crossing the finish line and show jumping. She's a beautiful horse, and I was very, very lucky and you know, glad that everything worked out as well as it did. That was a pretty nerve-wracking experience because she was actually just 8 years old at that point. And she'd only been eventing. I think she did her first intermediate near enough a year to that weekend. So it was a big ask, but she stepped up to the plate, and she couldn't have been any better than she was. So that was extremely exciting.
Well, Doug, that brings me to, you mentioned briefly the amount of horses that that is at your farm. We're just getting into gist that you're going to a lot of competitions, and the one thing I want to just kind of mention to our audience is you put in the numbers, and I have to say the number of jumping rounds that you do and dressage tests and the number of horses you ride, it's just got to be adding up to experience. Can you tell us just a little bit about your lifestyle? Because I see you at competitions, show jumping competitions, a lot of them. And how many days a show jumping competition is? How many rounds do you typically do a day? And give us kind of an average of how many jumps you jump a week.
Yeah, jumps a week would be challenging. So I would say on a straight up average event, we would normally be bringing sort of 5 to, it depends. Okay, so if it's one of these events that starts on a Thursday and ends up on Sunday, we'll probably end up bringing somewhere between 5 and 8. If it's a one-day competition, you know, obviously that number would go down a bit. I think I've ridden as many as sort of 7 in one day, but honestly, it becomes counterproductive at that number. So we try to keep it down to be able to keep enough time for each of the horses to devote all of the time and attention they need to succeed. Jumper shows is a bit easier, honestly, to pull it off. And I would say probably on those guys, I probably would do, totally throwing a number out, probably 10 rounds a day. And that would be 10, you know, of course, some of those would be jump off rounds, some are speed classes and all that. So you're thinking, let's average it out at 15 to probably 15 jumps, maybe it'd be an average. So you're looking at 150 a day in competition. Then you're warming up, obviously. So call it 200 a day. So you're looking at 800 to 1,000 per week jumps, I guess, you know, something like that.
If you don't see a distance by then, you're
well, yeah, I hope you do. Well, yeah, you hope. I mean, the wild thing last fall at at the Tryon long format, we had 3 in the 4-star, 1 in the 3-star. We figured out, I think I was on cross country for 53 minutes that day, which was crazy. Yeah, it was, it's wild. I think the thing that's really important to note is that while yes, there's a bunch of horses here, we try and stagger their development and their sort of their peak part of the season so that they all sort of none of them get shorted. And we would operate on a normal day-to-day sort of top down. So we go the guys doing the highest level early. So honestly, I feel best when I'm most sharp and attentive early, and then we finish up the day with maybe the babies that are doing 4 or 5 year olds. So the nice thing with the 4 and 5 year olds, if you're just a little bit less sharp or whatever, frankly, if they had a really light day and we went for a hack instead of did something intense, I think that's often advantageous for them anyway. And I think that the most important thing on an everyday, regardless of level, is I try to be as attentive and sort of precise with every horse that you can, but short duration is way more important than a long ride of mediocrity. So if it ends up being that it's a sort of 20-minute ride, if it's a really precise 20 minutes, that's way more productive than an hour's worth of mediocrity. And I think that's the big takeaway. Make sure what you're doing when you're doing is very deliberate and for what each of these horses would need best, and try and make the most of it.
I love you wrote a book, and you discussed that in the very beginning of the book, how your exercises have to be objective, no emotions. There were 2 major points in there: that the horse is always learning, and that your exercises have to be deliberate and objective. Can you expand a little bit on your training philosophy with that?
Yeah, sure. I think the huge advantage to competing as much as we do, it's not even just the number of rounds or the number of jumps that you might see, but we've been making a really big effort of late to try to pick the competitions that provide the best competitive environment for the horses. So be it conditions, might be footing, courses, all of that, but then also along with that becomes quality of riding. And I think there's so much to be learned from, just watching, or say you're 10 out before your next horse, just watching really good riders do what they do. And I think there's something that can be learned, and frankly, everybody can apply this, but make the most of the opportunities you have. And frankly, often you're getting a free lesson from some excellent riders and competitors. So from all the disciplines, I think it's something every time we go out, I try to learn or refine or try and make something a little bit better. And then with that, then I bring that home and say, okay, now I really need to be smoother here, or be a little bit more attentive, or frankly, you watch a jump off and somebody is able to pull off a really unusual line, but they do it in a really great fashion. You try and analyze how it is that they made that happen, or frankly, maybe it's cross country that somebody did a direct line. I mean, I went back and watched Kentucky from the spring, and there's some things I did, and I'm watched some of the very best in the world attack the same combinations and say, okay, well, maybe I could have done this a little bit better by tweaking whatever it might be. There's little things all over the place. But I think if you're always learning, always looking at it as an educational experience, there's a lot to be learned, a lot to be gained, and frankly, it doesn't cost you anything to benefit from it.
Well, from my observations, you're a true competitor, especially with some of the shortcuts. I always see you cutting a line or coming on the inside of somebody else's tracks, and even at Rolex, you try to go, okay, well, I'm going to see if I could just go between his tree line.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. There's something to it with, now I'm lucky enough, we have, well, maybe we'll back it up a bit. The most of the horses, a very large majority of the horses that we have here, we've had since the time that they were weanlings, and then we've got a few that maybe joined in the party a little bit later, but I would say very strong majority we've had since they were absolute babies, and I would have started them, and from day one I've been the first one on their back and all that sort of thing. I will present the same complexity that they might see in a 5-star event or a 4 or 5-star show jump round or whatever it might be. I'm going to try and present all of that when they are just getting started. So be it a super severe angle or a skinny or whatever it might be, but it might just be a rail on the ground from day one. And I think that they become, and I then become, because I know the partnership, right, super comfortable with coming on aggressive sort of inside lines on all that sort of thing, but it's something they would have been exposed to from the very beginning. So it's not ever, because there's that level of comfort, then you can take what would often be perceived as a bigger risk, but frankly, they've been exposed to it from the beginning. And a lot of times, say, I don't know, example would be Kentucky this spring, went through the bushes before the footbridge. Frankly, I really didn't like the turn that they put you on by going outside the bushes. And the nice thing is that going through the bushes, there was a little gap there. It doesn't look like it's much, but it's enough. And actually the bushes end up holding the horse a bit. So you didn't have to use so much rein contact to get the same rebalancing effect. And it actually puts you on a much better line to the jump itself. So something like that to me ends up being a no-brainer, because frankly, you can be softer, quieter, still get the desired result, and then frankly be on a better line. And so I'm always looking for every course that we ride, trying to look for those sort of things. And frankly, that probably saved 15 meters worth of time or space, which at the end of the day does translate. It makes it a little easier on the horses and makes their job easier and hopefully then more successful.
Well, I want to now back up to when you started riding, because this will tell us a little bit about, you know, your training and
Sure.
your personality competing. So how did you start riding?
We're incredibly lucky.
I know riding's in the family, so
yeah, we're incredibly lucky to grow up. Very lucky to grow up with a very horse-centric family. My mom's judged. You guys have already spoken to her, right? So she's judged 2 Olympics and every 5-star in the world. So it's something that both my sister and I grew up with. It was outside the back door. It was what everybody did that we knew. And I guess in the end, it ends up becoming just a natural thing that you happen to do because it's sort of normal. But not to sort of glance across it, we're both, my sister and I, both in pony club. We're extremely competitive. I was not so much competitive in the beginning, especially in the dressage, and then my sister is beating me all the time, so that becomes a motivating factor. You got to get better. But yeah, basically growing up until we were, through high school years, we were lucky enough to have one horse that we were competing, and we're able to pick up a few rides on the side from others. And our deal with our parents growing up was, again, given the best opportunity possible as far as education and exposure. But we had to sell whatever we had at the time to go to college, and did so. And then anything beyond that was on our dime and sort of unsupported. So upon graduation,
you didn't see yourself as a horse professional going to college?
Not at all. No, I never thought I would. I had a degree in mechanical engineering, and I worked for a while for a forensic engineer, did accident reconstructions. And I figured I'd be doing something like that. And very, very long story short, there was, I was going to go into forensics, had to go through the state police to do it. And the state went bankrupt, pushed the start date back. And I started riding more and more on the side. And I was making roughly what I would have made starting for the state police. And I said, you know what, I'm going to give this a shot now. And always could go back if needed. But clearly at this point, it is a good decision. And I'm extremely happy we did it.
Did you learn anything from mechanical engineering that you could apply with your riding today?
Everything. I think everything. What that does, what the engineering does, sort of ingrains in you a scientific method, a very analytical way to approach problems. And I think there's a lot to that as far as just diagnosing or figuring out maybe what might work really well for this horse or that horse, or frankly in a course walk, as far as efficiency, where you're going to go. Yeah, I wouldn't trade it for the world, that's for sure. And I think also, everybody there's a huge push now for sort of teenagers, early 20s growing up that would like to ride, that they skip school. And I would be such a huge advocate of getting an education, because in the end, this is, I love what I do for sure, 100%, and wouldn't trade it for the world, but it's not easy. Right. And
Yeah.
our goal day to day is to try to find more support to build our pipeline of horses, and frankly, the people that are going to be willing and able to do that are often very driven, well-educated, successful people. And I think it does make it a lot easier to relate when you have some other interests outside of horses. Not to say that, clearly I love horses, but there's a lot else that that
we lost
we're.
your picture there. There we go.
Oh, sorry. There we go. Sorry, somebody had just beeped in. But there's just a huge thing that you've got the ability then to relate and to look to other things that, looking outside the box, thinking outside the box can really revolutionize what you're doing.
And, so that brings us to, a lot of people wonder, how do you sustain a lifestyle doing what you're doing? How do you balance it out? Do you do teaching, clinics? You do a lot of showing, but
yeah, it's really tricky.
The
So
showing doesn't really sustain it.
Yeah, we've been very, very lucky over the years to build a group of supporters, horses, and people that are really motivated to be the very best in what we do. And with that, we've got a core group of supporters or backers that have helped us. But our kind of bread and butter is either horses in training, most often aimed at a competitive environment, and the personal horses that we have that are the top level ones. We often do a partnership in a lot of those. So Van Diver here we own half of, and that's pretty commonplace. We've probably got 10 horses right now that we have a partnership in, some sort of ownership stake. And I think having skin in the game is really advantageous and appealing to many, because clearly our motivations are aligned with theirs. And our main goal, we try to buy a weanling a year and try to keep a pipeline of horses coming. And if they, for whatever reason, are not going to make it, or we have some interest that, in all honesty, we get a huge offer on, we would have to consider it, because that is the means for us to stay afloat. And we've got, we're lucky enough with Jess and I, we've got 2 kids. They're 1 and 3 now. So yeah, our primary source of income is from training and competing. And then we definitely fill in with clinics, and the clinics are absolutely great. I absolutely love it, because it's one of those things you can get in, try and make a quick diagnosis, and hopefully if you can impart some amount of experience that's going to help these people, every one of them out. If I can somehow hopefully get one little nugget of information for each, I think we've been pretty successful, and I really enjoy that process. Clearly we're not at home teaching 4 or 5 days a week. That's we're just not able to do that, but we have a lot of people that do travel with us that do compete with us.
Don't you find too, when we go to clinics, you get a group of new people you don't see all the time, and we learn so much from them too.
100%, absolutely.
And it's amazing how much
and
how much we learn from them and figure out problems.
For sure. And I think also it's been told many times, but by teaching, you often learn as much teaching as maybe the people receiving the instruction do, because you find out very quickly what works with what different type of horse or rider. And I think also the great thing with clinics are generally filled with people that are really excited to learn and looking to improve. And if you can be a small part in that process, it's absolutely rewarding.
Yeah. And you have a farm now in, is it North Carolina?
Yeah, just north of Durham, North Carolina. So it's been,
Very good.
we talk about every once in a while you get, an offer to sell a horse, and it was one of those that we couldn't say no to. A horse called Crown Talisman. He had just gone over. He was
I
he was
remember him.
sixth at Saumur, which is over in France, current 4-star, and we owned half of him, and we were able to sell him for a price that would allow us to buy the property that the farm is currently on. And sort of he was one step along the way, but a huge foundation was set with him. And that's kind of how we've operated going forward, is that if something like that happens, we have to always be open to it, because in the end that set us up for life now, because we have the ability to develop horses in a much more efficient manner, and we have full control of the environment. And that's well, as you know, that's a huge step, rather than relying on a rental sort of situation.
Yeah, I want to give you a little plug for your book, and here's the book cover. The Riding Horse Repair Manual. And it's not something that you typically see, is where you see, here's a bunch of problems and here's some fixes. So give us a little idea of what your thought behind the book when you wrote it, and a little bit what it's about.
Yeah, sure. Well, the cover shot is that horse Crown Talisman that we ended up sort of effectively buying.
I noticed that, because I was like, did you publish the book before they bought them?
yeah, exactly. I tell you what, a funny story about that. The cover shot there, one of the aspects in the book was rearing, but I really didn't have a horse that was rearing at the time. So we had to, in the shoot, make it look somewhat realistic that this horse was going to rear. And so I had one of the kids that was working for us at the time held a jacket pretty much like a skirt. And Tally, his name was Tally, his bar name. He was pretty reactive, period, right? So the poor guy, he got lots of treats after this, don't worry. But we walked up to him, and we were about 10 feet away, and I had him just like flip the skirt up, basically flap it, and at the same time sort of end up going, and sure enough, like reared up, spun, wanted to bolt the other way, which I didn't blame him at all, right? But it was the only way we can get that. And shooting the photos for that book was that was an entertaining process for sure.
Yeah, there's some entertaining photos.
Yeah, we wanted to. Yeah, without a doubt. Yeah, I was lucky enough to get an article that was put into Practical Horseman about riding a bunch of these problem horses, and like I said, growing up, we weren't from great financial means, so we were clearly got a huge heads up, or sort of leg up with education. But we always end up, the horses that I was able to ride were ones that potentially didn't quite work for somebody else one way or the other. So it was one of those things you kind of had to figure it out, or you weren't going to be going to the show, or frankly, you weren't going to do well at the show. So I was lucky enough in that way to be presented with a whole bunch of stuff growing up, and was lucky enough to sort of figure out a pretty efficient way to resolve each of these. And so I was asked by Trafalgar, who published a book here, if I was interested in writing, and if I wanted a ghostwriter, or I'd do it myself. And frankly, went to engineering school, so I think my longest paper I ever wrote was 10 pages. And this is 65,000 words, I think. And it was a huge undertaking, but at the same time, it was like, okay, if I did a ghostwriter, I'm going to sit there right next to him, sort of going word for word, so it didn't sound funky. So I might as well just do it myself. It was a huge process, but I learned a hell of a lot doing it, I will tell you that. And
I read it, and I could actually say that I hear your voice all the way through it.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah,
it's a good book, Doug.
And you hope it could be something that would be it's a really difficult thing because there's a lot of feel that goes along with all of it, right? And that's the hardest part to impart to the reader, per se. So I tried to lay it out in a way in which it was most logical progression, and and with hopes that it could help some people.
What I liked about it most was you really you, I don't know if you're conscious of it or what so, but you talked a little. This is what I zero in on.
Yeah, yeah.
You talked a lot about the conscious part of it. About these things happen. Horses are real simple creatures, and I think in today's day and age, we have a lot of people today that are so uber sensitive of failure, that when they read this, they really see that other people, there are horses that have been started wrong, and maybe it will help them to prevent them from doing something wrong with their horse from over emotional riding, but also to have a little bit more of empathy that, hey, your horse is doing this, these problems do arise, and we've worked through them too.
Yeah. Well, without a doubt. And I'll tell you the funny thing. Um, you look at even I'm trying to think how best to describe this. When I was growing up, you watch the people that were riding at Kentucky or the Olympics or the Worlds or Pan Ams or whatever it might be, and you're like, I can't believe I would so love to ride a horse like that, because it must be just basic perfect. You go around and it's just easy and whatever. Every single one of those horses had some oddball quirk still to this day, right? And
Yeah.
like Van Diver, I love him to death, but on the flat, it's a big challenge without a doubt, right? And he's not built the best. He's pretty on the long side, and collecting is challenging for him, and he just continues to get better and better as we're going, and that is obviously the hope. But to say, anybody that's here with us today, okay, well, it's so easy to say, well, my horse maybe isn't quite the best in this or that or whatever. In the end, you have the opportunity. They're super genuine creatures, and I think given the time, there's a lot of them that will overcome a whole lot for us, and from that, I think it's worth the pursuit for sure.
Well, and Doug, and that's why I said in the beginning too, where you put in your numbers, and I have to say that the training that you do is very monotonous and simple, but the progress is real evident, and you just can't shoot for big things all of a sudden. You just have
Yeah.
to keep doing, over and
Yeah,
over
it's
again.
in a weird way, we're lucky enough to be exposed to it more often than most probably, but you have top trainers come work with a 5-star horse, and you might not get off the center line going a center line halt trot away, or working on circles in the court. I mean, it's very, very basic things that are the foundation, is what allows you to do all the tricks basically. And so most of these guys at the top level, they're doing very, what would be perceived as simple exercises, but doing them to an exceptionally high degree.
Yeah. Well, I like I listen to Equa ratings as well. There's a plug for you, Sam Watson.
Oh yeah, they do a great job.
They're amazing, and I love the statistics to come up with, and even Sam would say, people couldn't tell whether I was working my advanced horse or a green horse. We're doing the same stuff, and
Yeah.
yeah, no, it's very good. I'd also like to I wanted to talk a little bit about an exercise that you always have set up, and I'm going to post that up here. If you wouldn't mind talking about this exercise that you're saying that you have set up in your yard, and it's quite often that you run the young horses, the advanced horses through it,
Yeah.
and it was recently featured in the Practical Horseman. I think
Yeah, sure.
Practical or Chronicle.
I
Yeah.
think it was Practical Horseman did this, but yeah, something we use all the time. And I do think that it's super important. If you were to look, let's start with the oxer there with the circles either side. It's basically just a figure 8 over it. By the book, the placing rails are too tight, right? But I do try to keep that oxer, probably even with the most advanced horses we have. If it gets up to 2 feet, that's a lot. But I would say majority of horses that would ever see this would be sort of 1 foot to 18 inches in height. So it's not a super, super tall exercise. But with the younger horses, you might start on a 20 or maybe even 30-meter loops coming into it. And then with the most experience, so the 5-star horses, they do the same thing, but they'd maybe be going on a 10-meter circle into that figure 8. And what it'll end up providing or teaching the horses is, well, let's back up a little bit. When going to a jump, I want to think that the midpoint of the turn before it, you have the canter that's necessary to accomplish a task at hand. So if it ends up being a longer distance related line, you've already put them on a longer step at that point. If it's a shorter, you put them on a shorter step. This sort of exercise would be a touch on the shorter side. And then on the exit of that turn, as you're approaching the fence, either you happen to see a really good distance and you just leave it alone and do nothing. But if it doesn't seem perfect, if just anything feels out of whack, or you just get that little feeling in your stomach, you're like, oh, this doesn't feel quite right. I'm just going to basically close my fingers and effectively warn them that it's not right, but don't prevent them from making the mistake. And then this exercise, I think, is hugely helpful because the placing rails will require or encourage them to be super active with their footwork. And
Yep.
you can then come to the fence in a quieting way, but then they have to sort of just pop off the ground.
Now,
Having
Doug,
Dierks,
I have to,
yeah.
for a moment there, I just want to give my testimony on this because I did set this up. I had it set up for the last 2 days.
Yep.
And my experience with it was exactly what you said. I had a really rangy mover that would come to it, and he would come in a bit wrong. But I tell you, after a few times, he learned to do a back of his canter up before the placement rail, and it really taught him to pop off the ground. And he even taught him to land closer on the backside of the fence. At first, I saw those distances, and I was just like, "Are you kidding me?"
You're thinking there's no way this is going to work.
but I went and gave it a try, and it works out beautifully. And then I had a real young horse that was really looky, and the distances are short enough that they're not going to scare them either.
Exactly.
It's a really good exercise.
And I think that the most important thing about all of this is I like to think you have a ratio always, that something is either physically challenging and mentally easy, or something that's mentally challenging and physically easy. So I would say here, especially if they say younger horse, this is a lot to think about all at once. So I'm going to keep the heights of the fences low so that the repercussions of a mistake are minimal. And, as the horses, that's a bit of feel for sure, but as they get more proficient, then you can go a little higher. But I would never challenge them with a whole lot to think about and have the jump height super big. So small jump height, don't be afraid of it at all, for sure. With this sort of thing. I
love that. Can you repeat that one more time, just so people can write that down?
Yeah, sure. So so you have a ratio always and a balance act, right? That again, there's something you're going to present them with a problem that they have to solve, and it's either going to be mentally challenging and physically easy, so something that's a lot to think about but quite small, or maybe you want to test their scope or get them to think about using their body a bit bigger. Maybe you jump some bigger fences, so it's physically more difficult. But on those bigger jumps, I'm going to put that on a way more conventional line, or maybe a gymnastic, or something that in the end they don't have to think about sort of what foot goes exactly where, whatever it might be, but try and figure out the best way that they can use their body to jump the fence most effectively.
Well put, Doug. Tell us a little bit about the rest of the exercise.
Yeah, so we've got that. So you're going to start with your figure 8. Now, the other thing to keep in mind too, with a greener horse, maybe a 4 or 5 year old, they're not quite strong enough, or like you were saying with your horse there, it's pretty rangy. If they did a little trot step before the first placing rail, I just wouldn't be bothered at all. As they get stronger, then of course you'd like them to continue cantering, but if they happen to ever think about sort of slowing down in front of the fence, as long as you know, or you feel as if they're drawing you to the fence, and you get that feeling that they're clearly making an effort and they're going to jump the jump, I'll give them as much time as possible on the front side of the fence. Never feel like you've got to rush them to make that happen, right? So I'm always thinking, and I think the most important thing, even say at the very highest level, all the exercise that are presented on a course or in a test or training at home, whatever, should feel almost slow, even if you happen to be going quickly. It should still feel like it's approaching you in a sort of a chilled out kind of manner, basically. So we got the figure 8 there over the oxer, and once that's set up well, then we can go oxer. You get a lot of variations here, but you can go. I'd probably introduce maybe the angles, and again, quite small at first, and have them steep enough that I want you to set it up in a way in which you look at it, you're like, oh, that almost looks too steep. I'm not quite sure if I can make this work. But again, have it small enough that, again, they can near enough walk up to it and just kind of step over or pop over it.
Yeah.
So probably introduce the angle, and then you can start to now vary the other portions, right? So it could be oxer to the angles to the oxer, or maybe oxer to the first element, the A element there, maybe roll back on the oxer to the angles and back to the oxer with the placing rails. So there's lots and lots and lots of options, but again, that ratio is super important, and don't be afraid of presenting even green horses with pretty challenging angles, because very, very quickly you might get a wiggle the first time or second time through, but then very, very quickly they'll start to hunt out what's coming up next. And it'll also teach the horses at something like this that they should remain poised, and it's going to, a horse that maybe would often rush the fences will pretty quickly think, well, maybe I shouldn't rush because there's more coming up, that I might not be aware of yet.
Yeah. Oh, it's fabulous. And I like the design that you can keep repeating and keep a flow going on as well.
Yeah. And that's a great point. I would like to think that anything we're jumping at home, I would put it in a series of maybe it's 4, 5, 6 jumps, whatever it might be, but just an exercise that you can sort of continuously jump. And especially with the young guys, the babies, sort of 5, 6-year-olds, whatever, they might jump this whole exercise 3, 4 times in a row until it becomes super soft, quiet, smooth. And the moment that you get 2, 3 in a row, 2, 3 jumps in a row, right? So maybe one cycle through that's in a really quiet manner, I'll then reward them right away and let them walk and maybe move on to the next thing. But often it's a little sketchy the first time, kind of marginal second time. By the third time, all of a sudden you get there and it's just a really quiet, confident way, and then right away just reward that and move on from there.
Oh, that's excellent, Doug. I want to just ask you just a few quick questions off the wall.
Yeah, sure.
What's your favorite book you like to read, or that you're reading right now?
It's a great question. I do a lot of Audible because we're on the road a ton. And with the 2 little kids, I just don't have a whole lot of time by ourselves. But I do like to fly on the side. So right now I'm on a pretty big aviation kick. So really anything that has to do with planes, that's probably where I'm at the moment.
That's excellent. What's one little tradition you like to do or tell yourself on cross country day? Is there a little tradition you do in the morning before cross country, or is there something?
Have a good breakfast. I can't function without good breakfast. I'll tell you what, I got eggs, bacon, the whole deal.
That is excellent advice. I'm a breakfast man myself.
Oh, you've got to, because if I skip that, I'm in trouble. Like, there's no doubt about it. So, food is pretty high up on the list. And, as far as actual competition itself, I like to obviously walk the courses prior. If I happen to go later in the day or later in the order that you can watch some, I might go out and watch a key combination wherever it might be. But I think in the end, be super confident in your plan. You know your horse is best. You know how you're prepared best. Yeah. Most times, I would say your first impression or the plan that you create when walking the course is probably the best one for you and your horse. And so I really do try not to get swayed all that much by watching, because sometimes you watch and you're like, whoa, this didn't ride anything like it. Okay, so if it's really vastly different than you expected, then maybe alter your plan. But if it's just a little different, and you're like, well, it could be, I don't know, 5 strides or 6 strides, and you're thinking the 5 and everybody else is getting 6, so stick to your 5. Or it could be the flip side. It could be you want to put something on a little bit of a direct line or more of a bending line, and everybody's doing the opposite. I just wouldn't be swayed by that at all. In some ways, I do appreciate and like being a bit different.
Yeah, that's excellent. What's advice that you would want to give your kids that that you would say through your experience today that would make their life easier doing what you do? What's one little bit of advice that you would tell them?
You better really love what you're doing first, and then from there, clearly it becomes a lot easier, because it's going to be a ton of work. Clearly it's rewarding, and again, I wouldn't trade it for anything, but it's certainly, nothing's going to come easy. Nobody's going to walk in the next day and say, oh, here's my 5-star horse, come ride it for me. That's not going to happen. Forget it. Like, that's you're gonna have to make a few. It's chicken or the egg. So you're gonna have to create a few of these, sort of name changing horses. You're gonna have to teach them yourself, and you're gonna have to make that happen. And then outside of that, that's a great question. I mean, the biggest thing is you better really honestly love what you're doing, because if it's something that's driven by an outside pressure or force, you want to be happy in life. And the thing is that if you enjoy what you're doing, you're going to be much more sympathetic, kinder, better, and frankly, I think more successful with your horses, because they're completely intuitive creatures that are going to be able to pick up and read nearly all of that.
Well, and if you love what you're doing, you're always looking for ways to improve it, and things talk to you.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and I guess that's the other thing too, right? You got to think about we're lucky in what we do now, because your prime is probably 35 to 55 or 60, probably. I mean, we got so much time, and you see so many, I'm going to touch back on it, but so many kids that are like, oh, I can't miss these couple years to go to college. And that's total, honestly, that's total garbage. Like, I think I did my first advance when I was 18. And I got an A rating when I was 17 in Pony Club, and it, did a lot then, but I didn't do my 4th advance until I was 29. And, there was a huge gap there, but I had to restart everything. Clearly you had to go, but you would say, looking at results today, I think in many ways now it's even harder, because you look at Instagram and Facebook and you'll see every single kid out there that's, riding in a 3 or 4 star now, but there's so much time.
When you take a little bit more time off, you get mentally strong, instead of just competing to get out there and earn the awards or get on a team. You're a little bit more about doing it right, training.
And in the end, that resilience and the doing it right, that's actually in the end what's going to really make you good. You can, there's a long list of people that have had, a great horse early on and then don't end up doing much after that. And the guys that are able to consistently get there, they're not getting there because they're given all these horses. They've got a broad base of experience and training methods and techniques that allow them to be successful on a lot of different horses. And that doesn't come from one, that comes from riding hundreds of horses over the same stuff and just gaining that experience.
And to not go out too far on a different tangent, you see a lot of there's riders that are working out, going to the gym. I ride so many horses, I don't know how I could even make time to go to the gym. What's your stance on working out, and whether or not you're going to hit the gym when you only have one horse to ride in Tokyo?
I will be working out going to Tokyo for sure, because in the end, one horse. I mean, I don't know what I'm going to do with the rest of the day. Like, I think it might be just for more mental health than not. With the new
You might
farm,
be cutting down on that breakfast.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Quinn will be hating me. He's like, "What are you eating? You're freaking huge." Right now, we've just moved. We moved in like 2 weeks before Kentucky this spring to the 5-star, and both Jess and I they said it's like been the worst, like best and worst, like CrossFit boot camp ever. Like our bodies are sore from head to toe, just moving stuff, building stuff, whatever it might be. So at the moment, sort of extra exercise isn't really on the list, but I would say on a normal day, probably I'm riding 8 to 12, I would say, kind of on a normal day.
Yeah.
Right now might be a little bit lighter, but when everything's stable, I do like to ride a bike a bit, and I think it's a really good analogous exercise. I used to run a bunch, but my knees are not the best, so kind of gone away from that. But you do need to be fit, prepared, and if you've got one horse, then I would say with one horse you probably should be doing a bit extra. If you're lucky enough to be riding a bunch of them, well then you might have enough. You might be riding enough to be well prepared, but you do want to make sure your horse, you expect them to be an athlete in peak condition, and you want to be the same.
Doug, we are wishing you the best in Tokyo. And
thank you very much.
I hope that we could have you back after Tokyo to do a little recap of what you experienced there. And I hope you get to spend some time there. And I really appreciate you coming and joining us.
Yeah, without a doubt. And didn't know if anybody had any questions about anything.
Not at this point. Not at this point.
Oh, okay.
We don't have any questions, but because it seems like you've covered every topic really well.
Yeah.
And I want to say thank you from IDCTA for doing this with us and doing this with Eric. He's gotten really good at these things. So
yeah, no, I think everything was excellent. It was really, really well done. And thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. You tell Kyle that we say hi, and we'll have him on.
Yeah, no, we'll do for sure.
And to all our audience members, if you want to see this interview in its entirety again, or any other interviews, you could visit idcta.org. Thank you, Doug. I'll give you a call afterwards, okay?
Perfect. Yep, great.
Thank you very much, Doug.
Yep, thanks again.
Bye-bye.